One of the greatest takeaways from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is how easy it is to forget. While the narrator, Offred, is old enough to remember the way the world was before the new regime took over, the younger generations are not. Those young girls grew up in a world where a woman's only role was, and seemingly always had been, to be an incubator, and therefore saw nothing wrong with their place in the world. Because they never knew that the world would be a better place, the concept of rebellion itself was a foreign one and unlikely to even be considered. Take a look at the world today, and tell me what we could improve. If you're an older woman, or perhaps just one of the few with an interest in feminism and women's studies, you might be able to come up with a list of things to be improved upon. But for most women, they likely won't have an answer. The world is fine as it is. We won, and there is nothing left that calls for serious action. While it may seem obvious now that the Supreme Court's apparent decision to overrule Roe v. Wade is wrong, in a generation or two, maybe less, the concept of a world where women have bodily autonomy and control over their reproductive systems will become like a fantasy. It's not going to stop here, of course. It can already be a trial to get birth control in some places, and it's not going to take much to see a world where birth control is just as illegal as an abortion, where a miscarriage is investigated as a serious crime. Other countries are already starting to panic over lower birth rates. China is limiting their abortions now. And the US is following suit as governments fear a lack of soldiers in coming years. And yet, if you look on social media, you'll find that much of the discussion is not around the impending loss of reproductive rights for women, but around other groups. People discuss the banning of abortion as a step towards other losses, as a sign of the impending loss of gay marriage rights and the return of sodomy legislation. Few seem to consider the loss of access to safe abortions to be a loss on its own. Often, it is compared to or lumped in with other losses, as if it's not enough to be fearful of on its own. The subtext of "it's not just a woman's issue" is misogyny isn't important enough to care, so we need to lump other people in so we actually do. Others have used this to once again center attention on other groups, and seem to be using the spotlight for self-validation. Once again, women's issues are not allowed to be called as such, and the war over language has been co-opted to avoid addressing that this is a woman's issue that is caused by misogyny and systematic oppression by men. The right co-opts the language of the left to checkmate any criticisms of their opinions on abortion. They say that men can get pregnant, so ergo, men can have an opinion on abortion. No uterus, no opinion has been overturned in favor of continuing to support identity politics. Even if the right does not believe in them, they'll still use the language to their advantage. And the left is no different. This affects all people, they cry. Men can get pregnant too. And so this is a human rights issue and not a woman's issue. Already you can find conversations centering this as a trans issue somehow. That trans men who feel dysphoric about their pregnancies have more discomfort about forced pregnancy than regular women. That their suffering is somehow more than that of a normal woman. If the right is perfectly fine of removing women's reproductive rights, the left would rather discuss semantics about what a woman is than address the crux of why there is a war on abortion. See, the argument that this is about everyone's right to bodily autonomy, regardless of gender, is wrong. This is a woman's rights issue because women are the sex capable of becoming pregnant, which makes this sex-based oppression. If it was about bodily autonomy, regardless of gender, then there would be a similar crackdown on vasectomies. But there isn't. Violations of women's bodily autonomy happen because the patriarchy considers women to be second-class citizens and takes away our rights because of our biological sex and capability for reproduction. It's funny how the left can recognize why all lives matter is wrong, but are unable to see why feminism is only for women. Capitalism benefits those with the capital. White supremacy benefits those who are white. Ableism benefits those with able bodies, and heteronormativity benefits those who are heterosexual. But feminism must be for everyone because no one wants to name those who benefit from misogyny. If a movement is too broad, it's ineffective, but that's exactly what they want. If leftists and feminists are busy arguing over birthing bodies and how to properly address women who no longer identify as such, then they won't actually do anything to stop this erosion of rights. This is not a human rights issue. It is not a people's issue. This is a women's rights issue. Calling it otherwise negates that women are oppressed, that men are oppressors, and that oppression operates on an axis of reproductive ability. Even if you have no intention of sleeping with men, trust me, something can happen, and there is no guarantee that so-called rape or incest exemptions will actually apply to you. Stock up on Plan B. Print out resources on how to take care of unwanted pregnancies at home. Go to protests. Talk about this. Argue. Yell about it. We can't let the clock go backwards. We can't be forced, barefoot and pregnant, back into the kitchen. We won't go back. We won't.